Welcome back, everybody. We've had about a month off here, so hopefully you still remember we're in the iTree International Academy. For the last two sessions, we sort of did a high-level overview of all the iTree tools. I think our goal with that overview for the bigger group in that track one was really to get you to understand what the different tools are and what you might want to use them for. So for the next six sessions, we're going to transition to our track two, which is really trying to get you to be able to use the tools and apply them where you work. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, but just a reminder as we start off our sessions again, do keep your audio muted during the presentations. This will make a better experience for everyone. We won't have as much background noise. Also, use the chat window for any comments and questions. Again, we're trying to get you to be able to use the tools. So start to think about if you were going to put these tools to work, do you have questions that might help you get there? And please put those in the chat. We have Anna here monitoring the chat. And she gets really lonely if she doesn't get too many questions. So please do ask questions if there's anything that we can help you with in the chat. And we will try and get to all your questions in a timely manner on there. A couple other resources that are useful, the iTree website. That's where you can get to all the tools. The Academy webpage too. And maybe Anna, if you have a second, you can drop that webpage in the chat again. The Academy webpage, you definitely want to have that bookmarked because we're going to start posting things like homework on there. And that's always where you can find the recordings of the sessions. So if you want to find videos of these sessions so you can watch them at another time or watch them back as maybe you're working on the homework or something like that, you can find all that information there. And also our iTree support email. So that's info@itreetools.org. You can always ask any questions via that support email, and that will also be how you submit the homework. So again, our international team, we've got Liza from the Forest Service. Today, Maria and Krista will be kind of leading the way as we talk about iTree Canopy. And Maria is one of our resource experts down in Colombia. And Krista is with the Davy Institute, and the rest of the team is there and always available to answer any questions you might have, especially if you're more comfortable maybe talking to someone that's a little more local to you. The folks, Maria and Fabiola and Akshat are all great resources if you find having someone a little more local to be helpful. Again, just to remind you, the website, there are lots of materials on the website. You can find links to all the tools. We have lots of other really useful information on the website beyond just the tools, things like the underlying methods, all of our support materials. If you click on that support up there, that's where you can get to documentation about how the tools work and how to use the tools. We also have an international page under that support tab that'll help you understand which tools can be used internationally and how to use them. And we have a link to our video learning page. The video learning page, if we go through anything too fast or you want more detail, you want to watch just how to use an individual tool in a certain way, there's lots of really useful videos on that video learning page beyond what we're going to record for the Academy here. So you can always get to that, and it links to our YouTube page where all those videos live. And lastly, that International Academy page. That's really going to be your landing spot for all the materials related to the Academy. So that's things like recordings and the agendas. If there's useful information we want to share with you, it will be shared there. Things like the homework will be there as well. So do get that link to the Academy webpage and bookmark it so that you can get back to it when you need to. And of course, the schedule is up there, really important, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. So just kind of real high level with this track two, as we transition from that track one to track two, our goal is really to help you transition from just kind of understanding that iTree is really useful for estimating tree benefits to becoming an iTree user. So keep that in mind as we go through all these next few weeks. We're going to talk about iTree Canopy this session, and then we're going to focus on iTree Eco for the next 4 or so sessions. But really sort of hone in on what are kind of the hurdles that I see as you see Krista go through demonstrations of iTree Canopy to using the tools yourself, because really we want you to be able to use these tools when you get through the Academy. That's our goal. So that's going to be understanding the different tools, selecting the right tool for your project, and using those tools to quantify your community forest. So how do you get those results out of these tools? And we'll walk you through those steps. The homework will help you with those steps as well. But that last step is really important. It's how to communicate the results of your iTree project. So we're going to spend a lot of time kind of demonstrating the tools, but always have that in mind. So how do you get these results and how do you convey them to decision makers, policymakers, and your community so that you can have better community forests, more engaged community around protecting trees in your community and making sure that those trees are providing benefits where you want them. A little bit on the logistics. This is just the schedule. This is already up on that Academy webpage as well. So this is the schedule for our next 6 sessions. And I just put this up really to remind you that we do have 2 breaks in this. So we'll be doing every Wednesday except for January 29th and February 19th. And one thing to sort of focus on, and I'll circle back to this in a little bit, is that very last session. That's actually not us presenting at all. That's going to be you presenting examples or your ideas of how you're going to use iTree in your location. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but that's just a quick overview of our schedule and a reminder that we've got those couple breaks built in coming in a few weeks. And lastly, before I hand this back to Liza for a little bit of her thoughts, there is homework. So one of the expectations with this track 2 is that you submit homework. The homework is really just a chance to reinforce your learning. So to get to start to use the tools, we try to provide you with as many opportunities as we can for you to experience the tools on your own. And that way, if you run into any trouble, you have ready access to us so that we can get you back up and running so that you can experience the tools and see what kind of challenges you might run into and what new questions you might have. So with the homeworks, those will be posted on that Academy webpage. You can see that our session 3 homework is already up there. These homeworks aren't going to be super time consuming. This one is actually just a really simple first iTree Canopy project, so you can start to see what that looks like. So we're not trying to have you spend a whole lot of time. We just want to reinforce what you've learned in the sessions and have you begin to use the tools. And with all of those homeworks, when you complete them, you will submit them to that info@itreetools.org email. And we will keep track of the homework. That's part of knowing who's attending, making sure that you're engaged with the session so that we can get you a certificate of participation and at the end. So do make sure that you submit those homeworks. We're not going to grade them or anything, but we will provide you with feedback. You can also ask any questions about the homeworks during that submission, and we will be sure to answer those questions. So the homework's not meant to be a super big challenge, but it is a way for you to engage with us and engage with the tools. So with that, that's kind of a quick overview of what we're going to be doing in track 2 for the next few weeks. And I just wanted to give Liza a chance if she has any comments as we start track 2 here.
Thank you, Jason. That was well done. And I just wanted to wish everybody a happy new year and welcome back. Welcome to track 2. Why you're here, it's because you've been nominated or recommended by folks from the international program staff of the U.S. Forest Service. So being here is going to be a fun ride, an exciting ride, and hopefully you'll get to use these in your daily work and in your daily life. And we want to always hear from you of how you're using, not just questions, but how you're using these tools. That really helps us and how we can improve. So I'll turn this over to Jason, but before I do, please, if you can, change your name and add, if you're by yourself and not part of a group, please add the city you're from or the country you're from. If you're part of a group and you are the group leader, please add lead or leader to your name. That way, that really helps us, as well as your group number and the organization you're with. That will help me keep attendance. And we really appreciate on-time participation as well as being part of every session. That is a requirement unless you've talked to me way in advance about being absent. So with that, I'm just going to turn that back over to Jason, and we will be monitoring the chat for any questions you may have about these logistics. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Liza. So I'm just going to talk real quick, just again, to sort of keep you motivated with this track 2 and where we're going. So at the end of track 2, what we really like is for everyone to create an action plan. So we've done these academies about 6 or 8 times, and what we found is that you can go through the whole academy, you can attend all the sessions, but if you don't really think about how you're going to use the tools and how you're going to put them into action, once the academy ends, you tend to just sort of forget about iTree and sort of forget a lot of the lessons that you learned along the way. So we like to end these sessions with each of the participants submitting an action plan. So what do we mean by an action plan? Really what an action plan is you deciding how you're going to put what you've learned in the iTree Academy to work. So we keep these plans really simple. We're not trying to do a whole ton of detail. We just want you to have in mind, how are you going to use these tools as you go through and learn, maybe you'll say, oh, iTree Canopy looks really great. I have the perfect project. This is how I want to put it to work. And that's what we're trying to capture in these action plans. Or maybe you won't like iTree Canopy and you'll want to use MyTree, one of the tools we talked about a couple weeks ago. So the action plan is really a chance for you to put some of those ideas on paper. It helps you think through how these tools can be used for the exact projects and challenges you have in your communities around trees and tree benefits. It is meant to reinforce your learning. They're really simple, really flexible. We're not, again, trying to put a lot of extra work on you or anything. We just want you to think about how to put these tools to work so that the academy is really beneficial to you and your organization. The action plan we kind of break it out into a few parts. So these are things that you can, again, start to think about. What is the objective of your project? So we always, anytime we do iTree projects, we like to start with what are the objectives? Because otherwise you can just sort of go through a project and then you get to the end and you're kind of like, well, what do I do with these results? But if you start with an objective, you can really tailor your project to make sure you're answering the questions that are important to you. Where are you going to do your projects? So are you going to do maybe your whole city or maybe a community park or maybe a school campus? So you can start to think about what's going to be important for your first iTree project. And sometimes it's really nice to start with a smaller project, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few weeks too. And then you can always scale it up to larger projects once you understand how the tools work and how to communicate your results. And then you can start to think about your resources. So this is where we can't really help you a ton with knowing what your on the ground resources are. Maybe you're at a university and you have access to a bunch of students who can help you collect data, or maybe you have access to other NGOs who can help you with resources to do an iTree project. So understanding the resources in your community and the folks you work with is really important to conducting these projects. And finally, what are the challenges? So everywhere that you work, you all are going to have very different challenges, but in lots of cases, you'll have some of the challenges that we see really commonly to iTree projects, and we can help you overcome those. And even talking amongst each other about your action plans in our last session, you'll see that there are different ways to overcome these challenges, and it'll lead to some different discussions and ideas about how you can apply these tools. So these are going to be the parts of the action plan that you can kind of have in mind as we go through the next 5 sessions. And here's just an example. So at that very last session, we do ask for presenters from the attendees. And this is an example from Kuyen she was in the Academy, I think in 2021. But she used iTree Canopy to do a project in the school campus where she worked to estimate the tree canopy cover. And from there, she wanted to extend it into how to communicate to the students the benefits of trees and essentially had them measure individual trees. At that point, we didn't have MyTree available. If we had MyTree available, she probably would have incorporated MyTree as the tool that those students could use to measure trees. So this is exactly what an action plan is going to look like. We'll post some examples in the coming weeks on that webpage so that you can see a few more of these. But again, they're pretty high level and they're pretty simple, but they do get you to start think about how you would use these results and how you're going to communicate to get the change that you're looking for in your community. So keep all this in mind as we go forward. And what do you need to do around the action plan now? Right now, you don't need to do anything, but just keep in mind that you're trying to get to the point where you can use these tools in your community to create some sort of change or increase the understanding of the benefits of trees. So just think about these as we go through the next few sessions. Try to keep in mind that we're aiming towards this action plan at the end. So have that always in the back of your mind, how could I use these tools? Maybe Krista goes through and you're like, oh, I'm not sure how I could use iTree Canopy. You can ask a question in the chat so we can help you get to better answers as we go through, and so that you'll better understand the tools and better understand how to put them to work. So with that, Krista, I think I will hand it over to you and you can help us think through how to use iTree Canopy.
Right on. Hey, thanks, Jason. That was a really nice and thorough introduction. And I appreciate the taking a look at all of the different resources that are going to be available to everybody. And your photo of that Rodin sculpture always makes me chuckle a little bit. That museum is close to where Jason and I work, where the thinker is sitting. Okay, so again, I'm Krista. I'm going to be your tour guide today for iTree Canopy. And the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is open up a couple of screens to share with you today. We are going to walk through the iTree Canopy tool live and in person. And as I do this, I'm remembering that one of the things Zoom wants to make sure we do is provide, sorry, it wants to make sure that I'm providing access to all of the screens that I want you guys to see today. So I have done that. And what I actually want to do, though, at this point is remind both Jason and Anna that as I've gone ahead and done that, please feel free to remind me as we go along today. You will probably recognize a transition between one screen and another for me before the rest of our participants do. So all of this is just to say, Jason and Anna, please feel free to go ahead and let me know if you are hearing me walk through a page that we're not actually looking at. So there's a couple of different things we're gonna do online today. So that's why I just wanted to get that out of the way. But for those of you, and for, if you were with us for the last session, as Jason mentioned, it was a while ago. It was, December since we've gotten together. And really what we did was try to present an overview of each of the individual tools and how they might be useful to your work, what some of their capacities are, as well as what some of their limitations are. So as Jason was showing us different ways to think through action plans, now what we're going to do is actually open up those tools on the web. We're going to walk through the different ways that you would set up a project and think about the things that you want to make sure to include as you're walking through a project. And then as you're looking at the results, a way to think about how to incorporate what you can see from iTree regarding the benefits of your trees and your tree canopy, and how you can put that into how you can make that meaningful for your work, whether it's advocacy or actual a planting project. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to, briefly remind us that we're going to take a look first today at iTree Canopy, which is a land cover assessment tool at its core. And the way that Canopy does this is by working with the Google platform to look at aerial imagery across the globe. This is what makes it a great online tool. It's available without any downloads, and it is applicable to everywhere that Google provides aerial imagery, which is to say it's available across the globe. So one of the things we're going to talk about today are the ways in which you can use this tool wherever you are. And depending on where that is, there might be some additional considerations that that you have an understanding of because you're actually in those places. But it's actually for taking a look and surveying what you have, where you have it, in order for you to maybe get started, to get that baseline understanding of where you have cover. And, in addition, where you're also dealing with things like impervious surface or possible planting spaces, that you can learn from in terms of capturing that assessment. It's also going to allow you to look at the benefits of the canopy that you do have in aggregate. So this is not a tool that asks you to look at species specific information. This is going to be asking you to say, do I, for a randomly selected point on the map, do I have a tree there? or not. So it's going to say, it's going to then turn back results for you where you have identified that tree cover and how you can take a look at the benefits for, everything from carbon storage to stormwater management and also to air pollution mitigation. We're also going to take, after our break today, we're going to talk to Maria, who we have also met. She is with Forest Service International Programs in Colombia, and she's going to talk to us about how she implemented Canopy strategies within her country and within some of those cities. And we're also going to then, with the time we have left, talk about how to use these iTree canopy surveys to look at change over time. We're going to be able to access historic imagery through Google Earth, or frankly, through, if it's something that you have available to you, you can look at imagery from the past to then start to look at that change over time and whether or not, and comparing it to your baseline canopy information. So having said that, I do want to go ahead and we're just going to fire up the tool today. And I know that Jason was mentioning some of the ways that we're going to be thinking about homework. And again, don't let that intimidate you. What the homework is going to allow you to do is retrace some of the steps that we're going to look at today with the Canopy tool. And as again, it's a way to reinforce that learning. We're not going to be grading you. One of the things that you'll see as we walk through this tool is that we're going to introduce, as we start the survey, information about where we are, where you are. So you're telling iTree Canopy how to best assess the benefits that you have and where to start implementing your random point sample, where the geography is that you're interested in. And I will at the end get to some of the ways that we've put together some geographic information that you can utilize, or you'll see the other ways that you can get to that particular aspect. So I just wanted to say, don't be intimidated by the homework. We have a couple of different resources you can use. And it really is just an opportunity to, run through these steps so that you get the practical opportunity to do that after we've finished. But again, as Jason had mentioned, please feel free at any time to go ahead and pop your questions as we go along into the chat. Be aware that I might not personally see them right away, but one of the things that we can do is that if it makes sense, if somebody wants us to run through something again, we can do that. But also be aware that the video of today's presentation will be available after the fact if you wanted to take a look at anything again. So from the iTree website, you can access Canopy right from that front page. Again, this is not something that requires you to download any sort of software. This is available anywhere in any browser. We like Google Chrome, but if you're using Firefox or if you're using Edge, those are all completely applicable. You can even do this, like from a tablet. You might want to, if you're working on a smaller space, if it's not a laptop, but you want to kind of play around with it first to get a sense of what some of the possible differences might be. And I want to start just by opening up the Canopy homepage, and we can go ahead and get started. This is basically going to give you a little bit of a rundown of the kinds of things that Canopy does. We have a couple of links here to other tools, videos, and resources if you would like to look at them. But as with many things iTree, the first thing that Canopy is going to ask you to do is pick your location on a map. And before we do that, what I do want to, there are 3 sections that we are going to customize and configure before we get to the actual survey. And some of the things that I'm going to be doing along the way are reflected up here in the project menu, just in terms of these different steps and completing or continuing to work on a survey. issuing a report for the results of your survey, and some export features that we'll talk about along the way. I'm just pointing out that this is where these different items exist up here in this top menu, as well as some information on different references and other help resources for this particular tool. So now we're back at the map, which, as you know, some of you might remember, is one of my favorite places to be. And with the map, we're going to think about a couple of different things. We do have a couple of ready-made or readily accessible geographic boundaries that you can select. For example, if you were in the United States and you wanted to select a state or a county or a smaller, province designation, you could do that. We do also have readily available local authority boundaries for the United Kingdom, but because those are the only two countries that you can see with boundaries, don't let that intimidate you. That's far from the only thing that you can select from. Those are just meant to potentially make things easier if you don't already, if one of the things you're looking for is already in there. But this tool is going to allow you to upload your own file as well as draw your own boundary. Even if you have access to municipal boundaries or other sort of geographic delimiters for your area of interest where your project is, if you don't have access to those shape files, if you're familiar with GIS, that is not at all required. I'm going to show you how to to zoom into your location and draw the boundary that you actually want to use for this survey. But if you are in a situation where you work with either a partner or you have access to geographic information system files or GIS shape files, you can load them. And sometimes that's helpful if you have your local municipality or ward boundary, for example, or the administrative boundary that you want to work with. Maybe it's because it's the boundary for a particular park or other natural area that you're interested in doing this survey for. If you have access to those items, you can upload them directly. For example, if I were to go and browse to some different shape files, when you're working with GIS, and again, this is not something you necessarily need to remember if you're not familiar with GIS, but it's this .shp file extension that you'll be looking for to call up if you're loading your own shapefile into iTree Canopy. And it's usually something where you won't need to attach a projection file. If that's something that you come across if you are going this route, and if you have questions or problems with what we're calling the projection, just feel free to let us know. We can help walk you through that. But I don't want to get too far into the specifics of GIS right now. The other option, as we said, is that you can go ahead and draw your own boundary. So that's where I'm going to start today to show you how this operates. And you can search for any location on the globe. Today, I'm going to head up to Ottawa, Canada. So accessing the search, I'm going to see where that takes me. Here's my satellite image, which I find particularly helpful. You can, if for the sake of orientation, if at first you're more interested in seeing a basic street map, or if you're interested in following certain perimeters or of terrain, you can opt to look at those different selections. But I'm just going to go ahead and take a look at the satellite photo today. I'm going to keep the labels on for reference, and we're going to see what's involved in drawing this boundary. Ottawa, Canada happens to straddle both sides of the Ottawa River here. But what I'm going to do is stay to the southeast side just for simplicity. And once I've chosen this draw boundary option, I can see that I've got my little crosshairs, and I can start to click on this map as desired to start to outline my area of interest. And I'm going to do this relatively quickly. But as you'll discover if you play around with this tool, when you play around with this tool, you can be as general or as specific as you want. So for example, if I did want to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit so that I could take different care to follow the contours of the river as I'm drawing this boundary, I can do that as well. Or I can just make a straight shot to generally capture the location that I'm interested in. And once I've come back to my starting point, I'm going to go ahead and click on it so that it completes my polygon area. And be aware that if you wanted to, if you realized you actually wanted to do something that included that you needed to draw either a bigger or a smaller polygon, it's okay to start over. You can simply remove what you've drawn and redraw, which is usually easier than editing something. But what we're going to do then is basically say, okay, we have the area that we're looking for. We're going to continue to the next set of considerations and configurations. And the next thing that we're going to take a look at, so now we've selected our geographic area, and we're going to now identify what we want iTree Canopy to help us or to allow us to assess in terms of the land cover on the ground. So remember that the end goal for using iTree Canopy is to say, based on this geographic amount of area, how much canopy do I have? Not specific to species, but whether or not there is, we're looking at points on the map. Is there a tree? Is there not? Is this a tree or is it not a tree? So at the very basic level, what you need is to have this assessment of how you're telling the tool that you have trees versus other land cover categories and classes that are not considered to be trees. The basic land cover setup that's available to you includes things like things that are not trees, right? So we might be capturing where we have grass or other herbaceous lands, such as agriculture. You could look at impervious surface, and you can break that down so that you're differentiating between buildings or roads or other paved surfaces. You can capture water, you can capture bare ground. None of these are essential to discovering where you have tree canopy, right? So that very basic, is it a tree or isn't it, is what you're going for. But there are opportunities to customize this if understanding where these other land classes exist, or where these, what the propensity of these land cover classes are for you. So if you're interested in determining how much of your space is agricultural, how much is impervious, how much is another category, you can capture that information as well. And be aware that even if you've selected this basic land cover option, you do have the opportunity to edit these selections. So perhaps you want to go ahead and change grass and herbaceous to agriculture to be more clear. Perhaps one of the things that you want to do is take impervious surface and include it in one specific category. If you're not interested in differentiating between structures and roads and other paved surfaces, you could delete a record. In this case, I'll go ahead and delete impervious with the exception of what in this set is called impervious other, but I can go ahead and edit that, and I can say, this is going to be all impervious surfaces. So I'm just leaving it as one impervious category. You want to tell it, again, is this something that I'm going to be identifying as trees? And so this is no. And the abbreviations and the description are more important for you as the surveyor of the land classes, if that makes it more convenient for you to have that. You can even go in and it's asking us to if we want to change the color for this, and I'll show you where that comes up once we start our survey. But I will change the color just so that we can see that differentiation. Do be aware that this is something you can save for the future. If you have edited your land cover classification setup, and it's something that a colleague might use later or that you might use later if you're working on a different geographic location that's similar. You can save these edited categories and reload them if that's something that interests you. So we'll go on to the third configuration spot, and this one is actually we still haven't gotten to the fun yet, I know that, but bear with me as we walk through what we're going to tell iTree Canopy about the environment and the climate where you are. And the reason it's important for iTree Canopy to know that is because what it's going to do is assess the cover that you have in the geographic area you've identified. And it's going to make the assessment of tree benefits for you based on what we can glean about the environment where you are. And those things are going to be determined by what your temperate zone looks like, how much rain you get, and where it's available. We have it's also going to consider pollutant and weather station factors so that it's getting the climate right. And a lot of that has to do, frankly, with the precipitation amounts, but also the growing seasons that we know happen in different places all over the world. So we want to think about this in a couple of different ways. We've reiterated that this tool is available for anybody, anywhere on the globe. And I know that the first thing we're looking at here is this subset of country parameters that might not include where you are, right? So don't let that intimidate you. We've recently updated this so that we are including some geographic and related weather and climate information for the Ukraine, for Korea, and also for New Zealand. We've had the United States and the United Kingdom and Sweden for a while. But again, what we're actually going to do today, you'll notice that the location I've chosen is in Canada. Canada is also not on this list. So what we're going to do is walk through what would happen if your location is not on this list. And it's not uncommon for that to be the case. Usually you can always check in with us to sort of find out how to walk through this approximation. But essentially what I'm going to do today, considering that I'm looking to do a canopy survey for a place that is not on this list, I'm going to designate a location that I know is similar. So I'm going to use a proxy. And that's easier for me at this juncture because off the top of my head or within easy reach, I don't necessarily have these conversion factors that I would want regarding pollution removal rates and values in Canada. Again, wherever you may be, if that's information you have access to, these are, and I'll walk through this in a minute, there are ways that you can customize even these removal rates and value, monetary value amounts, those values. But what is the easier approach by far is to go ahead and have those set up for you. So if we think about Ottawa, it's in the southern part of Canada when we think about Ontario, but it's also very close to northern New York State here in the United States. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a similar city that sits in like the similar climate zone for Ottawa, Canada. In this case, I decided to zero in on Buffalo, New York. And again, if you don't know where Buffalo is, that's totally fine. we can always help walk you through these choices about how to decide what location might work as a good proxy for where you are. You can also frequently, look it up online. You can go ahead and sort through similar climate locations to the place where you are. But since I've decided to use as a proxy Buffalo in New York State in the United States, I'm going to go ahead and access the menu for the US. And once I get to New York State, I can look at this even further and break it down into a county selection. It doesn't go further than that into a specific city. But Buffalo, New York happens to sit in Erie County, New York. And what you'll see has just happened is that upon selection of this climate area, this climate zone, I can now see these pollution removal rates as well as carbon rates, and those monetary values have been populated based on the information we know for Buffalo in New York State, which is our proxy today for Ottawa, Canada. And as you have, again, as you have questions about that, you're always free to let us know. The other thing that I'm going to do is take a look at what I anticipate, or, what the general state of my location is, and whether or not it's rural or whether or not it's urban, and whether or not it's a mix. And the reason you want to make this distinction is primarily for the air pollution estimates that you will see once you're finished with your survey. Those frequently are correlated with the population of a city, and where you have more people, you will frequently see higher values for some of the returns on your benefits from trees. And a lot of that has to do with public health. If there are more people in a location who are benefiting from air pollution mitigation, you will see higher representation of those health benefits, right? So that's also one of the reasons that you want to keep in mind the size of your location in terms of people. And, if you're setting up these proxies, again, if these are values that you can actually, I'm going to go ahead and select urban, first of all, before we step away from this. And if you actually know the values that you're looking to reproduce, or, these multipliers, if you will, you can edit them directly. And you want to make sure that so we've made this choice, but if I have those values and I want to plug them in directly, I just want to go ahead and turn off this selected location choice and go ahead and edit these if these are values that I can personally upload or identify for a location. Today, we are going to use the selected benefits. Just to make sure you're aware, you can also change up things like currency notations and English versus metrics, if that's something that, excuse me, if you're more interested in seeing things in metric, which probably makes a lot more sense for you. So once we've set up this configuration, we're pretty much ready to roll. And it might feel like it took us a long time to get there, but it took us about 12 to 15 minutes to set up our configuration today, right? And once you've done this a few times, it gets easier, it gets a little bit faster. So now we're back in the map, and this is where the user interpretation of our aerial photographs puts this in, you now have the power to drive this survey. What Canopy is going to do is take a statistical random sample of points, as many as you designate, and it's going to allot them across the geographic boundary that we have identified. And we're essentially going to take a look and say, okay, do I have a tree or do I have something else? So be aware that you can zoom in using this map. You can, work your way around. There are, ways that you can go back. And the other things that you're seeing here is a running ticker we don't have any results yet, but what you'll see as we start to populate this survey and classify the points, it's going to run the percentages for us. It's also going to show up here in this chart. And if remember, one of the things that we did when we set up impervious surface was that we changed the color. This is where some of that comes into play. Those colors will be what are used to identify each of the points on the map once we've selected the appropriate land cover classification. So the very first thing I'm going to do is come down here to this little plus sign down at the bottom. You know, it's under this setup. We don't have anything yet. So by selecting that plus sign, it's going to add the very first point. And this can take a little bit of getting used to, but what we're looking for here is this yellow crosshair that is dead center of the map. Again, be aware that if you're looking at this on a different kind of screen, maybe it's smaller, maybe it's not quite as wide, or maybe it's taller. It should be dead center of whatever the image is that you've pulled up. We're going to take a look at a couple of these different points to see how this works. Sometimes they get a little obscured, and sometimes it can be a challenge to decide what exactly is that crosshair sitting on. In this particular example, we are, in fact, looking at tree canopy. So I'm not even going to change the cover class. I'm going to save this point. And I'm going to say, create a new point, set the next one for us. So it made that one a tree, and it brought up another crosshair, which I can see right here. Now, if I zoom in a little bit, that's as far as it's going to zoom in for me. And I am aware that this crosshair right now is actually quite challenging to see. It's yellow, and it's just off of this tree shadow that I can see. So again, sometimes you want to get used to looking for this right in the center of your page. But I can see that this is in fact, the mark is over a parking lot. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is identify this as an impervious surface and keep going. And I have not, this is totally a random point array that is being established by Canopy. So I didn't get to look at these ahead of time. This is giving us some interesting opportunities to think about the ways that, you can consider these as you're marking these locations. This looks like a construction site, and there's a couple of different things that play here. It can be really hard to know what's underneath and whether or not this is bare ground or if this is truly impervious. This is one of those situations where you as if this is a place that I can't say that I know Ottawa, Canada very well. So I am actually going to say that right now this is not impervious surface, but that this is bare ground, even though I can tell that it's construction. But hey, never say never. It's always possible that this was an outline for a playground, and maybe there are now trees in this location, or maybe that's going to be the goal, right? We can always hope. But for now, I'm going to call this bare soil. And let's see, let's keep going. Here I basically have some grass. And I'm not going to actually do this for too much longer. I'm hoping that we get some interesting opportunities to look at. Here we again have some more impervious surface. One of the things that I'm trying to convey by working through a couple of these points is also the relative ease with which you can start to get into the flow of a canopy survey. And the reason that can be nice is because over the course of an afternoon, we can see that several of these points will be identified. We're going to talk in a minute about how many you want to do. But especially as you sort of get the habit of identifying where these crosshairs are being located and how you can best, this is a good one, how you can best then identify what it is you're looking at, you can kind of get into a rhythm. And one of the nice things about iTree Canopy is that over the course of an afternoon or less than a day, you can basically complete this very basic survey that's going to tell you about your landscape and about your geography, specifically what does your canopy cover look like and what's the distribution look like. So that's why this tool can become really valuable if you're looking for a nice report with the statistics for your canopy in a relatively quick amount of time. The reason this one in particular is a really nice example is because we have something that comes up with aerial imagery quite a bit, and it's the shadows that you will often see regardless of how this imagery is captured. But if I go ahead and zoom in, and if I look at this long enough, I can see that this happens to be a little median that has a tree in it. So I can go ahead and identify this as tree cover. But be aware that those shadows can sometimes make this interpretation challenging. Sometimes you might have those shadows impacting whether or not you're, right on the edge of a sidewalk and whether or not you're looking at grass. Here we have buildings, so I'm going to go ahead and put this as an impervious surface. And actually, here in this case, we're on a road, still just generic impervious surface. And oh, yes, I was going to say, let's see if we can get at least one more tree. And we've already done 10 points, and it took us about 6 minutes. So again, I'm trying to reiterate the fact that once you get into the flow of how these surveys operate, it can really be something that gives you results in a fairly quick amount of time. And it's just handy. So in terms of approaches that can give you a reliable estimate of your canopy cover in a relatively short amount of time. So what we can see over here is a couple of things. As we've been going along, we've been getting updates on both this tick list as well as our chart of land cover classes that we've been looking at. We've only done 10 points, right? So basically, a lot of times folks are asking us, how many points do you need? Does it depend on how large my geographic boundary is? And there's not one answer. So we usually try to suggest that folks give themselves time to do at least 300 points. Frequently 300 to 500 points is going to get you a lot closer to, it's going to get you a stronger estimate. What we're going to be looking at, and I'll show you these in the report as well, but you'll notice that this tick list is showing us of what we've captured so far, 10% of what we've looked at is bare ground. But the plus or minus 10 is a standard error. So right now, that's pretty high. And what the standard error is looking at is assessing, in terms of the space that you have, what sort of diversity and consistency are you seeing across the land cover so far? And it's calculating that standard error for you. What we suggest to people is that you want to get that standard error as much below about 2% as you can. And when you're approaching 500 points, give or take, you're usually going to have achieved that if you're in a traditional municipal area that's going to have this particular diversity of urban land covers that you're incorporating. Sometimes this might look a little bit different if you are doing your estimates for a much more heavily forested area, and you will frequently just reach the standard. You'll be bringing down the standard error a lot more quickly. The program will recognize that, basically the frequency of the land cover that you're looking at. But so the next thing that I want to do right now is go ahead and take a look at the report. Ooh, I take that back. I'm going to go back to the survey because I forgot to show you something important, and then we'll look at this report. So what we have not done yet, and again, we've done these 10 points, and I could keep going, but what we haven't done yet is save this project. And the reason this is important is because Canopy, I've been mentioning the utility of being able to do this pretty quickly. But do remember that this is something you can work on for a while and walk away from. You don't have to do it all in one sitting. So let's say I've done 200 points, but I'm going to go get lunch, or I have to go, pick up somebody at school. I'm going to save this project. And usually what I try to do is give the name of the project information that helps me understand what it's for and where I left off. So if this is Ottawa, Canada, I'm going to say, these are the 10 points that I've done. Maybe I'm going to put today's date. But for right now, I'm just going to say January. And I can save this. I've identified how many points I got through. Maybe I come back this afternoon and I do 100 more points. I would save that file as the one that has my survey completed through 110 points. But be aware that as you save this file, it's now going to be in my download files. It's going to have this extension called ITRCNPY. Again, that's not something you can just open if you have it in your file management space. You can't open it on its own, but you're going to be able to open it if you ever come back to Canopy. Or when you come back to Canopy, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later. It has to do with how you can set up your project. And again, if we were not starting a new one, if we were opening an existing file, that's how we would do that. But you do want to remember to save your project every couple for different numbers of points that you've accomplished, or for maybe every couple of minutes. What you don't want to lose is any of the classifications that you've already done for the points that you've worked on, because if you get through 300 points and you haven't saved your work, that can be really frustrating. So again, let's go ahead and see how this report looks. The first thing that I like to do, again, we don't have a whole lot of points going on here because we only did the 10, but it comes up on a blank white space. And however, it's preferable for you to go ahead and look at this space. You can set up these different backgrounds. It will reproduce this chart for you to show you the percentages and the distribution of the land cover that we can see. But what we're really interested in here is the impact of the benefits that we can now get those estimates for. And this is where we can see reminders of how many points we've identified for a given land class already, what percentage of our total area that represents. And because it knows the area, the size of the location, it can tell us how much of that area is represented by one of these categories. And as you continue to do this, you'll see these values change. So you can take this report on the 10 points, but clearly once you've gone back and you've done several dozen more, you'll be able to see these numbers adjusting. And we can see then for the carbon and the air pollution, as well as the hydrology estimates, it's going to give us a reminder. I don't know if you can see this too well, but it's going to remind us what those multiplier values were that were selected from the location information that we posted in that configuration earlier. And it's going to then do those calculations for us for those estimated benefits. Basically, then what you can do with this is a couple of things. We're going to be able to either print this report as a PDF. So if it's going to turn this into 2 pages so that you have the page that is the map and then the page that is your benefits. But that's how you can go ahead and save. That's the easiest way to save these reports, is to save them as that PDF. But there might be situations where you want to export this information. And if you go ahead and export this to a CSV file, you would be able to open it in a spreadsheet if you so chose. And it would give you each point it would basically identify the latitude and the longitude of each point that you've recorded. And it would offer you the classification that you gave to it. But be aware that those exported itemizations for each point are then something you can use to calculate and adjust your percentages for other purposes if you need to take it and put it into another program or another report. It's not actually going to reproduce these line item totals for you, but you would have those in your PDF or in your report. So, okay, I'm actually going to go ahead and stop for a minute. And for those of you who have been walking along the survey online, feel free to, let us know if you've had any questions. But I'm also going to check in with Anna and Jason to see if we have just any questions about the basic how-to and the demonstration so far. But it's time for us to take a break. So we want to take about 5 minutes, and when we come back, we're going to talk with Maria about how this was implemented across Colombia. But are there any questions we should take care of before the break, or anything we want to see again?
Yeah, Crystal, we just had one that is probably worth taking care of. It was just a person said, in the case of Vietnam, which is not in the setting option, how do we know which available city region on iTree Canopy has the same climate zone with my city? They were in Ho Chi Minh City. And I answered them. I pointed them to that one website that does the weather similarity. But if you have any other insight you want to add to that, because it is pretty flexible, and people can always type in their own multipliers too if their country has background information.
Right. And I think that starting with the link that Jason would have provided, he and I both use that. But it's essentially, you want to understand the location that you are working with and thinking about, first of all, what climate zone are you in, right? What sort of weather environment does that represent? So any of the ways or the tools and resources that you might have to say, and sometimes this can be as easy as looking at a website or asking Google, what other locations in the world, or specifically what locations in the United States, are closely representative of the kind of environmental and climate, situations that I have here where I am. And a lot of times it's not just about how hot or how cold a place gets. It's frequently also going to be how much rain do you get? And even if rainy seasons are sort of in different times, but what it's trying to do is get you as close as possible to your tree growing season. And part of that is related to the way that it's going to say, if your canopy behaves as expected for this particular place on the planet, this is how we can give you this estimate as best we can that reflects the kind of performance and the kinds of benefits that you would see from your tree canopy. So that includes a lot of things that, not just in terms of development, but and relative urbanness, but really what it's thinking about is how are these trees in terms of literally how close are you to the equator, and whether or not you're temperate or whether or not it's a lot more humid or drier, and again how much rain you can expect to see. So it's thinking about the average growing season for your trees, especially because we're calculating those benefits often based on what can be anticipated leaf area for your particular canopy cover in your location. So I know that's not an exact answer, but that's like Jason said, it's pretty flexible, and that can be a challenging question. And you're always free to ask us more about how to walk through that process. But again, that's that third configuration, looking at your regional settings, that if you need to come up with a place that has an environment that looks like yours, the best place to start is, the internet.
Hi everyone, I hope you are doing all very well. I'm going to share with you our experiences using iTree Canopy internationally, especially in Colombia. First of all, we are going to start with these questions. Do we have an optimal tree cover? Is there equity in the distribution of tree cover and green areas in the city? Is tree cover increasing or decreasing over time? What are the benefits of the tree cover? These are questions that you can definitely answer using iTree Canopy. We have been using iTree Canopy since many years ago in Colombia. We have used it in Cartagena, in Medellin, Cali, Bogota, and not only in the city as a whole, but also within each city, we have analyzed the distribution of the tree cover in the comunas or localities or neighborhoods. Also, I want to recognize that this is a collaborative work. I mean, we have worked with many people doing these iTree Canopy projects. We have worked with the Botanical Garden in Bogota, universities, environmental authorities, even high schools. We have worked with them, for example, in the city of Cartagena. I am going to share especially the results in the city of Medellin. We did a whole survey in the city. We worked with 1,000 points. We found that we have a 28% of tree cover in the city. And you can also see here the results of the other cover classes in the city. And actually, we used these results, I mean, the mayor's office used these results to participate in the 3 cities of the world call that ask you a very basic question about what is your tree cover? Do you know about the tree cover in your city? And they accept, or they actually put like a choice to if you did an iTree Canopy survey. Also, you can have the results of the ecosystem services of that tree cover in your city. You have the estimates for the carbon sequestration, carbon storage, air pollution removal of each one of these pollutants. So you can have an estimate of the ecosystem services or the benefits of this tree cover. And you can share that result with either the mayor's office or the researchers or professors or even the community, the citizens that are, of course, are very interested in knowing about the benefits of trees. When with iTree Canopy, we also did a survey for each of the comunas. In the case of Medellin, Medellin is divided in 16 comunas, and we had these results that are shown here in which you can see that the distribution is not equal through all the comunas. I mean, there are comunas that have less tree cover than others. So that is an information that is very useful for the planners and for the urban forestry office, because if they want to have a planting project, that is when these areas here, the comunas here are, let's say, more important, or you can prioritize the planting of the trees here in these comunas that have less tree cover. Also, we did this comparison between the green areas versus buildings. This was a part of actually a graduate work from a student from environmental engineering program. And what she found was there are some comunas that have less green areas, but there are others that even have higher green areas than buildings. We can see here that there are changes in tree cover over time. We did this for several comunas too, and some comunas increased the tree cover, but there are some comunas that decreased the tree cover. And this is important to know too, because if there is a trend in some comunas to decrease the tree cover, definitely you have to do something about it. You have to increase the plantings, the tree plantings in those comunas. So this is the land cover change analysis that we did for one of the comunas in specifically the Comuna 10, which is located in downtown Medellin. We analyzed 1,000 points and we analyzed 2 years. First, we did the survey for 2018 and then we did it for 2008. We had like 10 years, a 10-year difference between the time. And what we found, first, you have to obtain the results for each year, to, in this case, 2008 and 2018. And then you compare the percentage of cover of each land cover. And we found that, for example, for Comuna 10, we have an increase of 40%, more or less. And that is, in this case, that was a good news because you are increasing the tree cover. But the results, if the results will be the opposite, that will be something that you definitely should worry about, right? So you can do this with iTree Canopy, that you can do a land cover change between 2 years, the years you want, and 5, 8, 10, 12 years, anything that you are interested in. And we also have the benefits of the trees in terms of, as I was saying before, about the carbon sequestration and storage, and also the air pollutant removal, and actually the avoided runoff to the hydrological benefits. It gives you an estimate too. So how can you use the iTree Canopy results? We started with some questions. So these are the questions that we could answer using the iTree Canopy. So if we have that optimal tree cover, and if we had the equity in the distribution of tree cover and green areas in the city or the area of interest, and if this tree cover is increasing or decreasing over time. Definitely, iTree Canopy is a very, very useful tool for the decision-making process related to urban forest management. These results can be used for planners, researchers, NGOs, and all the civic groups that really want to protect the urban forest and the citizens. Also, I don't know if you are familiar with this rule, the 330-300 rule, which was proposed by Cecil Konijnendijk, director of the Nature-Based Solution Institute. He recommends in his rule that every neighborhood should have at least a 30% tree cover. So you can see, you can check if you have this recovered using iTree Canopy, and in less than a week, actually in 2 or 3 days, you can have these results. So I really recommend you to use it. I encourage you to use iTree Canopy to get these results. Thank you very much.
She started and then how that project expanded based on one of the things we've been talking about today. It was sort of knowing in advance, or at least thinking a little bit in advance about what the objectives were and what the goals were for this project. I met Maria in person probably 7 or 8 years ago when this was, she was just moving this along. She was familiar with Canopy and had bigger dreams and wanted to see how far she could go. So one of the things we talked about was how to get the most out of Canopy, how to take a look at different neighboring geographies to get at that question of equity that she's talking about, and the different things that you could do with the results. And one of the things that Maria recognized early was that she needed a team. She needed some people who could help do this work. And it is an example of, using Canopy to its fullest extent, which can, which requires a little bit more patience and a little bit more time. But like she stated, it's a great project if you have access to students, because they can help you. And it also helps them understand a little bit more about how to take the results and think about your benefits in ways that'll move your project forward. And I think we only have a couple of questions that I will ask you, Maria, before we step away. My question to you was going to be whether or not you remember, how did you choose a proxy location for your climate and location configuration in Colombia?
Yeah, the thing is that we use a tree canopy mainly for land cover. So we used the average of the United States.
Okay.
But we will
Okay.
use maybe Florida. I mean, if we were going to use it for benefits, but for tree cover, you don't really have to choose an state, because it
Right.
doesn't depend on that. So yeah.
Right. If you're simply looking to get that baseline value for your percentage, which is much more relevant to the conversations and demonstrations about equity and distribution, if that's what you're after, yes, you don't need to be quite so specific. And we are going to continue to talk a little bit this afternoon with the time we have left about how to do canopy surveys to look at this change over time. One of the questions was, how did you pick 10 years?
Mm, Actually, we thought that 10 years was a good, I don't know, yeah, 10 years ago, what you had in that area. But basically also is that if you go further, maybe you are not going to get good images to analyze. So yeah, even in 10 years, maybe you don't have a good image also. But yeah, it was just like, yeah, 10 years look like a good number for us.
Yeah. And that's a perfectly good answer. And it's also one of those items with Canopy that is flexible. And we are going to talk about how to identify those time periods in just a minute. And Jason, interject if I'm wrong, but I think we're caught up on questions for Maria. And we can use the time left to talk a little bit more about how we look at canopy change over time. But
Yep,
what
we're
Maria
good.
shared with us is just super important for understanding the scope of the kinds of projects that Canopy can help you accomplish, the different ways that that information can be used to either, complete the information you're looking for or to propose a new project. I didn't get the chance to ask Maria, and maybe we'll be able to ask her this in a future session. But now that they have that understanding of the inequity of the distribution of their canopy, how has that impacted decisions that might be made moving forward about where to try to increase canopy or how to take a look at different locations where you might want to be improving those benefits by increasing canopy cover and thinking about some of the ways that you can do that. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to sharing screens. So again, if we get to something, Jason and Anna, that you feel I am talking about that we can't see, feel free to let me know. But I think this will do it. And okay, so what I want to do right now is just go back to this is just our 10 points in Ottawa, right? So this is a super small survey. We're using it for the sake of example today. What we were able to see with Maria's work, and some other, examples that we've looked at previously are how to take the end results and, really move them forward for your own purposes or your own project. But for the sake of demonstration, we're keeping this simple. I'm going to come back to my 10 points. And I actually, I hate to do this, but I want to take a step back because before we talk about change surveys, I want to make sure that before the end of our time today, that you have the information you need in order to take a look at Canopy and do the Canopy homework assignment on your own. So because I feel like we're going to use the rest of the time today to look at how to set up a Canopy survey looking at change over time, looking at change analysis. So I quickly want to take us back to, first of all, the Academy, the International Academy webpage, because where you will find information about the homework is under our session 3 area. So I know Anna threw this link into the chat earlier, but the two important pieces are going to be this document that has the description of the assignment and then download your location boundary. Again, it's another link to a folder that is going to have those uploadable shape files or .shp files if you want to use them. So just to take a look at the homework, it's very simple, but it's going to ask you to choose your location. You can upload one of the available shape files. You can upload a shape file that you have. Or you can draw any shape that you want. If you're interested in doing the park down the street from where you are, or your school or your office, that's also completely fine. But we're going to ask you to set up a Canopy survey that walks through at least 100 points where you've classified information regarding some basic land cover categories. And then essentially what we're going to have you do is either submit the report or the CSV file with all of your points to our info@itreetools.org website. You are welcome to submit any questions along the way, or if you send us your report, we're happy to give you some feedback. But if you have questions about what you were able to see or what you found challenging, or if something didn't work the way that you thought it would, you are more than welcome to ask us any questions along the way. The link for the folder with shape files, these are just in alphabetical order. We tried to come up with something that should work for the majority of at least the countries that we know are represented among our participants. So you are welcome to download any of these files, and once it's on your computer, you will be able to upload it into your Canopy survey if you so choose. But outside of that, again, if you have a file, you're welcome to use it. And if you just want to draw a file, you're welcome to do that as well. But I just wanted to make sure that you know where those items are. They're in the session 3 lineup for from the International Academy webpage. Okay. Just wanted to make sure we got that through. So the idea of thinking about your canopy analysis as something that's useful for looking at change over time is made possible again through the access to Google and Google imagery that's available on Google Earth and their archive of historic images that lets us do two things. Actually, the first thing we want to do is on our canopy survey, what year are we looking at, right? So it's not automatically 2025. If you'll notice, we've been looking at points in Ottawa. Looks like something that's maybe, nice midsummer. Everything is fully leafed out and green. January in Ottawa frequently looks a lot different. So this is not live. It's one of the things to keep in mind that what Google on a platform like Canopy, or even if you're using Google Maps, it's offering you an image that gives you the clearest image that it has available for the most recent period of time. So just keep in mind that one of the things that Google is doing is trying to give you a good quality photo that is as recent as that might be available. Once we take a look at the historic images that are available in Google Earth, we'll understand a little bit differently why that is. But the first thing that I need to do in order to make this possible is take the points that I've already surveyed. So this is my, up-to-date baseline, not necessarily current date, but current image year for this information about my tree cover. And one of the things that I can do up here under my export categories is send this to something called a KML file. And if you've never worked with them, that's totally fine. Just understand that this is a file that's going to have .kml at the end of it, and it's going to be something that you can open in Google Earth. So it's going to take the points that we've already identified and classified in Canopy, and it's going to create a file that we are going to be able to use to look at the same points against a different aerial image from another point in time. So I'm going to call this my Ottawa. It's still just 10 points, but this is my Google file, so it's my KML file, and I can save that. KMLL, KML. So at this point, what I'm going to do is open up these points in Google Earth, and then we're going to come back to Canopy. And instead of starting a new survey, we're going to tell it we want to do this change analysis. And for good and for, the reality is it's going to ask you to do the survey again. It's going to take the same set of points. It's going to put it up against the backdrop of the different historic image that you've chosen. And you're going to go back to each point and notice any differences and record any differences. So we're going to take a look at how that works. The first thing that I want to do is open up Google Earth, and you can search for it as Google Earth. It is an available program for your web browser. This is also not something you have to download, which is actually a little bit different. Up until last year, Google Earth was something you could use on your browser or on the internet, but it did not make these historic images available, and they shifted that last year. So we can now see those historic images without downloading this program. but just know that you can access it online. It's not something that you have to buy. And it's not even something that you have to, download and configure in that sense. We're going to be able to do this right online. And Google Earth, just to say it, to be clear, is separate than what you can experience or what you can do with Google Maps. So I know I'm throwing around the word Google a whole lot, but they make aerial imagery for the globe available for free. So it's one of the tools that we've tapped into to make this sort of analysis and looking at change over time possible. So these are different tips and tools that the program will give you, but really the first thing that I want to do is come up under these file options, and I want to import one of my I want to import the Ottawa KML file that I just created. So I'm going to do that from my device. I must have said drive. Sorry. Eek. Huh. Okay. This was not what I was expecting. Hang on one second. I thought this was going to let us do it from the device. Sorry about this, guys. Hang on for one second. All right. Spinning. We're going to import. Oh, I already did this. Sorry, gang. Let me try one more thing. And if this is gonna keep giving me access trouble, which it was not doing yesterday, we just may need to I may need to take a different look at this, but let's see if I can now. It still wants me to sign into Google Drive. All right, so what I'm going to do, no, it's not a place mark. Let's open a local KML file. So I think it was looking to see if I had logged in. Google likes to access things on your Google account. But I'm just going to say I have a KML file. This opened up my downloads folder on my computer, which is where I have this Ottawa KML file that I just created. And I'm going to open that in Google Earth. So even though it looked like it was making me sign in, this is an option that does not require a login for Google. Sorry about that hiccup, everybody. So what we can see now is that our 10 points that we classified in our Canopy survey are now being identified only by, the numeric values in their order in this Google Earth platform. So we can go ahead and take a look at them. We can, get our reference point. We can click on any one of them and zoom in for a better look. And again, this is going to be traditional ways that, you might be used to browsing around a Google interface. But the point is that we've created a duplicate of the points that we set up in Canopy. And now what we're going to be able to do is look at them in Google Earth. So we need to do a couple of things with our other survey. So now that I have my points loaded into Google Earth, what I want to do is set this up so that I'm just going to change the size of these windows so that what I can do next is place this Google Earth screen right next to my Canopy survey screen. And what that's going to allow us to do is look at the current aerial image next to the historic aerial image. So now I'm back in my Canopy survey. And what I want to do this time, like we mentioned earlier, we want to go ahead and set up a file not just for a new survey, but for this change analysis. So I want to go ahead and start over. And now what I'm going to do, instead of setting up my configurations, I'm going to call up from the file options my existing survey for a change analysis. And I'm going to also just browse to the downloads, my download folder, which is where I had saved a copy of the survey that we were building, our 10 points for January. And I'm going to load them again into Canopy. But because we've told it that this is for a change survey, it's not going to allow us to add any new points. This is simply for considering the points that we've already identified. And we're going to look at the historic images in Google Earth to see if we've had any changes. And this is essentially how this is going to go. So a reminder, you're walking through the survey essentially for a second time. But now, instead of the modern day image, we're going to be considering a historic image. So I want to show you how you would do that in Google Earth. And the first thing we need to do is go ahead and assess, when we're in iTree Canopy, what is the year of the image that it considers the current image? Remember, we talked about the fact that this is not a 2025, it's not a January 2025 image. So we want to see if we can figure out what year this aerial photograph was taken. And we can start to do that by thinking about some of the things that look, we want to make sure that the image we're seeing in Canopy is identical or very similar to the image that we're seeing in Google Earth. And then if we come up here to this little clock with an arrow around it, that's what's going to show us and allow us to use these historical images. So if I click on that, it's going to show me the very most recent image that Google has for Ottawa. And if you'll notice, we have an image that's different than the one that we can see in iTree Canopy. So if I take a look at the buttons that the historic images are displaying, I can see that this image happens to be from April of 2024. So it's a little less than a year ago, but I can also see that in this picture, I have a lot of trees that are still without their leaves. So I know that that picture from 2024 is not the one that the Google platform is showing me in Canopy. Because again, Google is aiming to show you the best quality photo that it can. So I'm going to come up here to just the either the timeline, or I'm actually going to go to this back arrow to look at older imagery. There's some snow that we can see was present in 2023 in early March. And if I go back again, ooh, there's a nice midsummer picture. Looks like the leaves are at about the same point in time. One of the keys that can be helpful is looking at things not just like the quality of the tree canopy, but looking at cars, things that you can identify as being the same in one image as to the other. So here is where I can see, looking at this car, and particularly looking at this car that sits on the road, that's driving on the road, is one of the clear signs that I have now decided that this July 2022 image is the one that I can see in Canopy. So the current photo interpretation that I'm using for the 10 points that we just did would be dated 2022. Now I want to decide how far back in time do I want to look? And the way that you're going to decide that is thinking again about those goals. Maria indicated that going back 10 years made sense, right? So if you're looking at a decade, it's going to be enough time to show you possibly meaningful change. But you may also have situations where you're looking to see the results of a project, or if you want to see what the canopy might have looked like before certain developments occurred. Or if you want to see, again, just, any of those points in time where you either know that canopy was removed or canopy was planted, and you're looking at tracking progress. Those are the things you can think about in terms of choosing the historical image that you want to use. The other thing that Maria mentioned, however, was that sometimes you might decide you want to go back 5 years, 10 years. But when you start looking at the historic images, you don't always have something that is going to be as useful as some others. So we might go back to, we know we were in 2022. So if I automatically go back to 2017 to give myself 5 years, I might want to take a look and see, do I have a clear photo from that time period that also allows me to see canopy with the leaves on? Or how do I feel about, sometimes you will look at an image that is leaf off or that's cloudy. That's because this historical image archive includes everything that Google has. Some of the photos are going to be much better than others. So for example, here's September of 2016, which is taking me back to, now I'm not at 5 years, I'm at 6 years, but it does appear as though I have a differently better quality photograph to use. So maybe that's the way I make my decision. If we wanted to go all the way back to 2012, we could do that as well and take a look around. Ooh, see, like here's a good photo from 2013 that might be close enough. So if it's not 10 years, but it's 9 years, that might be the choice that we make. But again, it comes down to deciding whether or not how important it is to you that you have gone back an exact amount of time, or how important it is to you to just be consistent and have clarity in terms of what you're looking at. And I know we are at time, so I'm very quickly just going to show you that then what I'm going to do is say, okay, so here's this point number one in Google Earth. And when I originally classified that tree in iTree Canopy, I noticed that there was a tree there, and there is already a tree there in 2013. It's not as large, but I'm going to leave that as a tree. So then what I can do is say, all right, what did I see at point number two? And I'm going to go through in the same fashion, and I'm going to be able to see that, yes, this was also impervious surface in 2013. Let's say that it wasn't. Let's say that this parking lot had actually been turned into something different. And if I had a tree there, or if it was under development and I had bare ground there, I would come into this edit option and I would say that in 2013, what I can see is that this point was not impervious. This tree was something else. So maybe it was grass. I will update that point. And once you've done that for each of the points that you will have a different set of results. The differences might be small, but if you're looking to account for change over time, that's essentially how you're going to set this up. You're going to relook at the survey across different points in time. Ooh, it looks like this project's been going on for a while. So we know that in 2013, this was still undergoing construction, and maybe that's I'm unaware of what this location actually is. So maybe this is what this looks like on a regular basis. At any rate, that's how you would take the points that you've created for your survey, assess them for a different period of time, and then by capturing those results and any differences in those benefits, as Maria was showing us, you can then say, this is how we can see that there was canopy growth. This is how we might be able to see there was canopy decline. And all of it will inform how you choose to advocate for your tree projects moving forward.